December 3, 1943, 31,000 feet above the Norwegian Sea. The night was crystal clear, and the moon cast silver light across the frozen waters below. Kapitän Heinrich Müller, one of Germany's most experienced Condor pilots, was flying a routine maritime patrol in his massive Focke-Wulf FW200, scanning for Allied convoys. His four-engine beast was armed to the teeth. 20mm cannons, machine guns, and a belly full of bombs designed to sink anything in the Atlantic. Müller was confident. The Condor was called the Scourge of the Atlantic by Churchill himself, responsible for sinking over 350,000 tons of Allied shipping. But tonight, something felt wrong. His rear gunner suddenly screamed over the intercom, "Contact! Fast mover, closing from 6 o'clock." Before Müller could react, tracer rounds tore through his starboard wing, ripping fuel tanks and shredding control surfaces. The Condor, weighing 24 tons fully loaded, began its death spiral toward the icy waters. Müller never saw his attacker. It had appeared from nowhere, struck with surgical precision and vanished back into the darkness. The aircraft that destroyed Germany's most feared maritime bomber wasn't American. It wasn't even fully metal. It was British, twin-engine and built almost entirely from fabric and plywood. This is the story of the Bristol Beaufighter, the plane the Germans called Whispering Death. If you're fascinated by how a fabric-covered plane became the most feared night hunter of WWII, smash that like button, drop a comment with your favorite WWII aircraft, and subscribe for more untold aviation legends. The Bristol Beaufighter was born from panic and improvisation. In 1938, Britain faced a terrifying strategic problem. The Royal Air Force had virtually no effective long-range heavy fighters capable of protecting bombers or hunting enemy aircraft at night. The existing Blaine light bomber was too slow and poorly armed. Meanwhile, Germany was building the twin-engine Messerschmitt Bf-110 Zerstorer, designed specifically for escort and interception missions. Britain needed an answer, and they needed it immediately. Leslie Fries, chief designer at Bristol Aeroplane Company, proposed a radical shortcut. Take the existing Beaufort torpedo bomber, strip out the torpedo equipment, and stuff it full of the most powerful armament Britain could manufacture. The concept was brutally simple: maximize firepower, prioritize speed, and build it fast using components already in mass production. This was not elegant engineering. This was wartime survival design. The result was a monster. The Beaufighter MKF mounted 4 20mm Hispano cannons in the belly and 6.303 Browning machine guns in the wings, the heaviest forward-firing armament of any fighter in the world at that time. For comparison, the Spitfire carried 8.303 machine guns, and the Bf-110 had 2 20mm cannons. The Beaufighter could deliver over 1,000 rounds per minute of devastating mixed cannon and machine gun fire, enough to shred a bomber in seconds or snap a destroyer's superstructure in half. But the Air Ministry was skeptical. Senior commanders argued the plane was too heavy, too crude, and lacked the agility for dogfighting. Critics called it a flying brick, and questioned whether fabric-covered wings could handle the stress of combat maneuvering. The Beaufighter's construction was indeed unconventional. While the fuselage was metal monocoque, the wings were fabric-covered geodetic structures, a throwback to older biplane technology. This combination seemed outdated in an era racing toward all-metal stressed skin designs. Yet this seemingly archaic construction method provided unexpected advantages. The fabric-covered wings were surprisingly damage-resistant. Bullet holes could be patched quickly in the field with dope and fabric, unlike metal skins that required specialized welding. The geodetic structure, pioneered by Barnes Wallis, designer of the Dambusters bouncing bomb, distributed stress across a lattice framework that could absorb tremendous punishment without catastrophic failure. More critically, the Beaufighter's twin Bristol Hercules radial engines, massive 14-cylinder powerhouses producing 1,600 horsepower each, gave the heavy fighter exceptional low-altitude performance and reliability. Unlike liquid-cooled inline engines that could fail catastrophically from a single coolant leak, the air-cooled radials could sustain multiple cylinder hits and keep running. This proved invaluable for maritime strike missions over the unforgiving North Atlantic. The technological breakthrough that transformed the Beaufighter from heavy fighter into night hunting legend was the AI Mach-4 airborne interception radar. Mounted in the nose with a distinctive arrowhead antenna array, this radar could detect enemy aircraft up to 3 miles away in total darkness. For the first time in history, fighter pilots could see in the night, turning the Beaufighter into a nocturnal predator capable of systematically hunting bombers over Britain. The first operational Beaufighter Squadron, No. 25 Squadron RAF, began night patrols in September 1940 during the height of the Blitz. German bomber crews, accustomed to operating with near impunity under the cover of darkness, suddenly found themselves being stalked by an invisible hunter. The Beaufighter crews perfected a devastating tactic. close to within 200 yards using radar guidance, visually acquire the target's silhouette against the night sky, then unleash a 3-second burst from all 10 guns. German bombers often exploded in mid-air, torn apart by the concentrated firepower before their crews even realized they were under attack. By mid-1942, the Beaufighter had evolved into something far more terrifying than a night fighter. It became the apex predator of maritime strike warfare. The Coastal Command Beaufighters, armed with rockets, torpedoes, and their massive cannon armament, began systematically destroying German shipping, U-boats, and naval vessels with unprecedented effectiveness. The Germans, desperate to understand how their ships were being attacked with such precision, began interrogating captured Allied pilots. What they learned horrified them. The Beaufighter's fabric-covered wings and radial engines produced a unique acoustic signature, or rather, the lack of one. Unlike the high-pitched scream of inline engines or the metallic resonance of all-metal aircraft, the Beaufighter approached its targets with an eerie, muffled sound that blended into the ambient noise of wind and waves. Victims described hearing nothing until the first rockets were already airborne. Norwegian resistance fighters gave the plane its most chilling nickname, Whispering Death. The effectiveness of the Beaufighter in maritime strike became legendary through specific operations. During the Channel Dash of February 1942, when the German battleships Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prince Eugen attempted to break through the English Channel, Beaufighters were among the few aircraft to successfully press home attacks through the massive defensive fighter screen. Though the ships escaped, the audacity of fabric-winged torpedo bombers attacking capital ships in broad daylight sent shockwaves through the Kriegsmarine. The anti-shipping Beaufighter TF-MEN-KX carried 8 RP-3 rockets under the wings. Each rocket carried a 60-pound armor-piercing warhead traveling at nearly 1,000 mph, capable of penetrating destroyer hulls and detonating inside compartments. A single Beaufighter could fire a salvo equivalent to a broadside from a light cruiser, then strafe the superstructure with cannon fire for good measure. German convoy captains reported that Beaufighter attacks felt like being hit by battleship salvos from an aircraft they couldn't hear approaching. The psychological impact was devastating. German sailors developed a pathological fear of clear skies and calm seas, the ideal hunting conditions for Beaufighters. Kriegsmarine reports documented widespread cases of Beaufighter panic, where crews would abandon their posts and seek cover at the first distant sound of aircraft engines, even when no attack was imminent. The mere possibility of a Beaufighter strike paralyzed German coastal convoy operations, but the Beaufighter's most strategically significant role came in the Mediterranean and Southeast Asia theaters. In North Africa, Beaufighters operating from Malta and Egypt wreaked havoc on Axis supply convoys, attempting to resupply Rommel's Africa Corps. The destruction of fuel tankers and ammunition ships directly contributed to the chronic logistics crisis that crippled German operations at El Alamein. Field Marshal Rommel himself noted in his diary that the constant British twin-engine fighter attacks were strangling his supply lines more effectively than any ground offensive. In Southeast Asia, where the Beaufighter earned yet another nickname, Beau, the aircraft became the primary strike weapon against Japanese shipping throughout the Pacific Islands and Bay of Bengal. The thick jungle terrain and vast ocean expanses made radar-equipped long-range strike fighters essential. Beaufighters hunted Japanese convoys with ruthless efficiency, sinking hundreds of transport vessels and effectively blockading Japanese-held ports. The Japanese, lacking effective night fighters or maritime patrol radar, were virtually defenseless against nocturnal Beaufighter raids that appeared from the darkness, destroyed ships, and vanished before dawn. The construction simplicity that critics had mocked became a crucial strategic advantage in remote theaters. Beaufighters damaged by flak or combat could be repaired using local materials and improvised techniques. Fabric wing damage was patched with parachute silk and aircraft dope. Engine maintenance could be performed by mechanics familiar with radial engines from transport aircraft. This battlefield repairability kept Beaufighter squadrons operational in conditions that would have grounded more sophisticated all-metal designs. When World War II ended in 1945, the Bristol Beaufighter had flown over 50,000 operational sorties across every major theater of war. Its combat record was staggering: over 2,000 enemy aircraft destroyed, making it one of the highest-scoring Allied fighters, hundreds of ships sunk, and countless ground targets obliterated. Yet unlike the glamorous Spitfire or Mustang, the Beaufighter received relatively little public recognition, operating as it did primarily at night and over the sea, away from the spotlight of daylight air battles. The reason for this historical obscurity reveals something profound about the Beaufighter's design philosophy. It was never intended to be a dogfighter or air superiority platform. It was a purpose-built weapons delivery system optimized for specific mission profiles: night interception, maritime strike, and ground attack. In this specialized role, it achieved near-perfect effectiveness, yet its very specialization meant it was quickly rendered obsolete by the jet age and peacetime priorities. The post-war fate of the Beaufighter mirrored that of the Mosquito: rapid scrapping and disposal. The fabric-covered wings degraded quickly in storage, and maintaining the complex Bristol Hercules engines required specialized knowledge that air forces were eager to retire. By 1950, most Beaufighters had been reduced to scrap metal. Today, only a handful of complete airframes survive in museums, a tragic loss given the aircraft's extraordinary combat record. However, the Beaufighter's technical legacy profoundly influenced post-war military aviation doctrine. The concept of the strike fighter, a heavily armed radar-equipped multi-role platform capable of hunting targets in all weather conditions, became the foundation for modern naval and tactical aviation. The F-A-18 Hornet, the Panavia Tornado, and the Su-34 Fullback all traced their conceptual lineage directly to the Beaufighter's pioneering combination of sensors, firepower, and operational flexibility. The AI radar technology developed for the Beaufighter evolved directly into the sophisticated fire control systems that define modern air combat. The principle of using onboard radar to detect, track, and engage targets beyond visual range, pioneered by Beaufighter crews hunting German bombers in 1940, remains the cornerstone of fighter tactics today. Every beyond visual range missile engagement, every radar-guided night strike, traces its ancestry to those fabric-winged hunters prowling the darkness over Britain. For the men who flew the Beaufighter, the memories were visceral and intense. Navigator radar operators crammed into the rear fuselage surrounded by glowing cathode ray tubes and primitive electronics, described the eerie sensation of seeing enemy aircraft as glowing blips on their scopes while flying blind through clouds. Pilots spoke of the raw power of unleashing a full cannon burst. The entire airframe would shudder and slow perceptibly from the recoil forces, while the target ahead would disintegrate in a fireball of exploding fuel and ammunition. The crews also remembered the fear. The Beaufighter was unforgiving. Its heavy weight and high wing loading meant it had limited maneuverability. If caught by enemy fighters, evasion options were minimal. Pilots learned to rely on speed, altitude advantage, and the sheer intimidation factor of their overwhelming firepower. Many crews reported that German fighters, upon visually identifying a Beaufighter, would disengage immediately rather than face the devastating defensive fire from the rear-facing guns. The Bristol Beaufighter stands as proof that unconventional solutions can achieve extraordinary results when necessity demands innovation. A heavy fighter built from fabric and improvisation became the most feared night hunter and ship killer of the war. Not through technological superiority or elegant design, but through brutal effectiveness and operational adaptability. It was a weapon designed for a specific war, and it won that war. What do you think was more revolutionary? The Beaufighter's stealth-through-sound approach or the Mosquito's stealth-through-materials philosophy? Which unconventional WW2I aircraft design impresses you most? Share your thoughts below.